to school and work, waiting for some fun while my boss acts like a jerk. Pro show afternoons, midnight sketch can't come too soon. The afternoon sketch can't come too soon. But at night I'm filled with dread. I know just what I'll do instead. Come on and follow me. It's time, you see, for Lorn and Apollo. Time to laugh and learn. Come feel the burn of what the fandom was. What random fun doesn't escape. Isn't it great? Late night with Lorn and Apollo.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all having a great day out there. I am joined tonight by my good buddy Martin Stone. And tonight, our main topic is going to be revisiting Indy. This is actually a suggestion that Martin had made some time back, wanting to have a general discussion about the idea that Indy doesn't really need to be in any of the films. Originally, we were going to debate that. I think that we can still cover a portion of that topic, but I also got a bit of a response last week when discussing the original ending for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in the Frank Darabont draft. And that was the part that we never got to in the original discussion we had of that movie back when this channel first started. So I decided I wanted to go back and revisit that ending because we never got to the climax. And so tonight's probably going to involve an awful lot of reading. I hope you guys don't mind that. But I think it's going to be a really good discussion because I think this climax is far superior to what we got in the movie, and I'm curious to see what you guys think of it. Martin,
I think we need a story time with Lorn interstitial.
That's sort of what this is going to be, and I hope that's not boring to people. I hope that it's not going to be a turn off to just have me reading a portion of a script. It's actually a fairly significant portion of a script, but I think it's worth it because I think this was such a better ending and it explained things so much better for the audience and it was more in line with what you expect from an Indiana Jones story. And you'll understand that when we get there. But before we get there, we've got other stories to talk about, and I'm curious about how you're doing. What have you been up to, Martin?
I'm doing all right. Just getting out there, trying to beat the heat. My air conditioner went out for like 36 hours.
That's not fun. I had that happen to me, I guess 7 or 8 years ago, and it was a case where it was in July, and they couldn't get out to my place for I think it was 4 or 5 days, and it was 100 degrees inside the house for about 4 days, and it was miserable.
It sounds miserable.
Yeah, when it takes that long to repair something, it's like you're laying on top of your bed at night sweating, and then when the repair parts come in and they get the unit repaired, it still takes hours and hours to get the temperature back down to where it's comfortable to live in.
I am almost at the point where it's comfortable. We're getting close.
Yeah. I'm sorry, man, but I'm glad that they got it fixed for you, and I hope it'll be a better situation for your family. We do have some super chats here right at the beginning. We've got from Spring 91 Bear for 250 saying, can't wait to see Cinema of 1988 on Friday. Yeah, I think everybody else is excited for it too, which actually reminds me I should give a brief update. I did reach out to Kevin Apollo this morning. I haven't heard back from him. I know that he has been busy and still dealing with energy-related issues, and so I have not heard anything detrimental. My assumption is that his health is still improving, but obviously he's not on the show tonight. Trish also might be able to pop in the middle sometime tonight. I'm not quite sure about that, but she has the link if she wants to join. And so that's why we're a little light on the panel tonight. We have Mark Fields for $1.99 saying, you know I'm going to say it, positive vibes. Same to you, Mark. Thanks for being here tonight.
Always happy to see it.
And we have Juliet for £2 sterling saying, "Morning late night live with Lorn, Apollo, and chat." And good morning to you, Juliet. Glad to see you out there. Hope you're having a good time. Let's see now. Our first story for tonight, which is one that I was not really sure if I agree. It is Ron Howard says Jim Henson would have approved the use of AI, which I guess we'll see what he says. Artificial
I'm open
intelligence
to an argument.
Artificial intelligence remains one of the most divisive topics in the entertainment industry. Several major Hollywood directors have come down on both sides of the issue. Speaking at a recent event, Ron Howard expressed his excitement about the storytelling possibilities the new technology offers. More controversially, according to The Hollywood Reporter, Howard also argued that the late Jim Henson would have embraced AI if he were alive today. Appearing at the Runway AI Film Festival in New York, Ron Howard spoke to the crowd before a screening of 10 entirely AI-generated short films. The director said of the technology, "It's very exciting in terms of its potential to more efficiently and more broadly help storytellers get their ideas out there. There are so many facts yet to be sorted out," he added. However, he argued that the possibilities AI offers will eventually become widely recognized. "We will want it," Howard said. Business Insider reports that at the event, Howard said AI is not something he has directly encountered in any of his projects, yet he compared it to CGI and traditional animation, which are already commonly used. "There are already CGI characters. There are already animated characters," Howard said. "I expect there's room for all of it." Regardless of the technology used, Ron Howard said, "Story is always king." In 2024, Ron Howard directed Jim Henson, Idea Man, a documentary about Henson's life and career. While Howard has said in interviews that he only met Henson briefly backstage at a talk show, he spoke extensively with Frank Oz and others who were close to the legendary puppeteer while making the film. Howard is also a longtime friend of George Lucas, another frequent Henson collaborator. The perspective he gained through those relationships and the documentary itself may explain why he feels confident that Jim Henson would have embraced AI. According to Howard, Henson's reputation as a practical effects pioneer has led some people to misunderstand his attitude towards technology. "Jim Henson just wanted to be busy making things," Howard said. Howard argued that the creative innovator was always looking for new ways to tell stories and experiment with emerging technologies, making AI a tool he likely would have explored rather than rejected. The claim is likely to spark a debate among fans. Henson is widely remembered for his groundbreaking puppetry work and hands-on craftsmanship. However, he was also known for embracing technological innovation throughout his career, frequently experimenting with animatronics, visual effects, and other emerging production techniques. Howard's comments comes at a time when many major industry figures are weighing in on AI. Directors Guillermo del Toro and Christopher Nolan have expressed skepticism, if not outright hostility, towards its use. James Cameron and Martin Scorsese, like Howard, have argued that the technology offers new creative possibilities. Meanwhile, Pirates of the Caribbean director Gore Verbinski has suggested that while AI is inevitable, a rating system should be implemented to inform audiences about the extent of its use in a film. Whether Jim Henson would have shared Ron Howard's enthusiasm for AI is impossible to know. What is clear is that the conversation surrounding AI and entertainment is only beginning, and some of Hollywood's most influential filmmakers appear increasingly willing to embrace the technology. So I have all kinds of mixed feelings about this one because I agree, Henson was a guy that was constantly embracing new technologies while making his films and projects and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some weird divides that are happening amongst these directors. For instance, Scorsese is one that I never would have expected to embrace the idea of AI. I am less precious, I think, about the idea of AI for generative work because the argument to me seems to be that people are saying that, well, essentially you're copying other people's work. You're taking other people's work that you have not compensated them for and using that to train these models to generate images or video.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Kind of
and
like if maybe you threw Dune and Flash Gordon into a blender and just whipped up
well,
Star Wars.
I guess that's a good way to put it. I was actually going to go to the idea of when you're learning how to sketch. Because, now, granted, I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. I can't draw to save my life. But for those people who do, I know a lot of times you're taking usually an artist's book that they have written that teaches you how to sketch so that you
Mm-hmm.
learn the dimensions that are in a face, for example, so you know where to place the eyes and the nose and everything. And oftentimes you begin by copying other characters freehand. You're not tracing, although you
Hmm.
can do
No,
that.
tracing is a legitimate first step in art.
Sure, sure. But the next step then is then trying to replicate somebody else's work so that you understand how they do it,
Hmm.
you know? And I don't see that as different. That is training. That is what training is. That's what
Yeah.
training means. And that's what you're doing. You're just not doing it to a human, you're doing it to a machine and software. So every work in some way is going to be derivative of something else. You can freely create things, but you're also informed by everything that you see, hear, and experience.
Well, that's Joseph
And
Campbell's entire thesis.
right, so I guess I'm less precious on the generative side of it,
Hmm.
but I do think that there are concerns to be addressed. It's like I don't want I I don't want to remove the artist's vision.
Hmm.
I think you still need a vision. But there is vision involved in creating AI work. You have to guide it. You have to tell it what you're looking for. And I think it works better when you do provide it with your own input. For instance, one of the things that we were talking about last night is keyframe animation. You know, if you're providing keyframes for your characters and then having it build, say, a video sequence between the two keyframes,
Hmm.
that at least gives it an idea of the blocking and the character design and the lighting and everything like that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you agree with Ron's take that Jim would have embraced this?
Um, so I can say that, some dead president, let's go with Calvin Coolidge, would endorse some policy. Doesn't mean I'm right. And sort of intellectually exhuming the dead to fight the current battle is, in a way, like when Hoover vacuum cleaner brought back, wasn't Fred Astaire, was it? It was guy from singing,
Gene.
Gene
No, I think
Kelly.
they did do Fred Astaire.
Okay, yeah, I think it was Fred Astaire.
One or the other. It,
Yeah,
it was one of those two guys. Yeah.
yeah, they brought back Fred Astaire to push Hoover vacuums, right? It's sort of the same thing. You're borrowing somebody else's credibility who doesn't get a say in the current debate. So I'm not crazy about that characterization, but that's a me thing. Do I think Jim Henson probably would have experimented with AI? Sure. I think um, I think Walt Disney would have certainly used AI for maybe some rapid storyboarding, that kind of thing. Um,
That's an area where I actually get really excited about it because I think that that's it, it's more this is where I do get precious about it, I guess. It's
mhm.
a more painterly way of doing things, and it allows you to develop your own vision while also using it to put it in your production pipeline to do whatever it is you want to do.
Right.
That I think is kind of cool.
Well, and
Um,
when you look at the great masters of, say, the Renaissance, and this is actually Mannerism and not Renaissance, but um, when Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, he painted the Sibyls. They're all riffs on the what's called the Belvedere torso, and they all the torsos of the characters are contorted in this one particular way that this one particular exhumed statue was contorted, but they didn't have the heads and the arms and the legs, so he just kind of tried to fill in what those might be.
how Frankensteinian.
Indeed. And so, you know, it worked out well for him to riff on somebody else's previous work. Uh, you see this sort of thing all the time.
Yeah, this is going to kind of sort of touch on our next subject a little bit, which is another one that I'm itching to talk about. Let me go to that one because I think that we can fold this in. Um, the Valve Steam Machine price was revealed yesterday. It's $1,049 for the base unit with the lowest amount of storage, 512 gigabytes, and no controller. And the upper end is $1428. That's for the 2 terabyte storage and the Steam controller included.
Is the base
And
unit the one where the animated women are still pretty?
I, I think they'd sell a lot of them if that were the case. Um, I think this was higher than anybody thought it was going to be.
That's
Uh,
pretty pricey. Yeah, that's a computer.
I know that everybody was um, initially when this was announced back in November. I think the common thought was that this was going to be somewhere between $500 and $700. I always thought it was going to be about 800.
Hmm.
To me, 800 felt about right. But then we had the RAM and the storage crisis that has been brought about by AI data centers.
Hmm.
And my thought then was that it would probably top out at 1,000. That 1,000 is the base price without the controller is shocking. And that with the upper level storage and the controller, it's 1,500. It's like this is crazy. And I've been watching all kinds of videos online about people pricing the parts to build equivalent systems or even ones that are better and at least sort of in the same form factor.
Hmm.
The pricing is about what it would cost to produce. So they're not gouging. This is what the market is demanding right now.
Hmm.
But I think it also threatens what Valve was trying to do here. There's all kinds of directions I want to go with this. Let me read the article and then we'll go with kind of what I want to discuss because this is also related to AI. Valve's Steam Machine is available for reservation now ahead of its June 29th launch date, and it costs a lot of money, something Valve and certain people in the know, like Linus Sebastian of Linus Tech Tips, warned gamers would happen. Does he go by Linus or Linus?
I don't know. I've
Okay,
never heard it pronounced.
okay, so I'm using
I
Linus
think it's
Torvalds
Linus.
pronunciation, but I'll go with Linus because that's the more common pronunciation. But despite the warnings, the reactions to the Steam Machine price reveal have ranged from incredulous to understanding to, of course, humorous. The Steam Machine is essentially a gaming computer designed to look and act like a console. You can hook it up to your TV and play all the games you bought and downloaded from Steam as though you were playing on a console. The first Steam Machine launched in 2015, but it was a failure and was effectively discontinued in 2018, with Valve no longer linking to the console. Last year, Valve announced that a new version of the Steam Machine was on the way. Last fall, Sebastian revealed that he had seen the Steam Machine and discussed the price with Valve. He recommended that Valve charge somewhere in the $500 range, using Steam game sales to subsidize any losses. He reported on his channel that the energy in the room wasn't great after he'd given them his suggestion. Clearly, the company was planning to charge more than the average console rate, something reiterated by two Valve employees, product designer Lawrence Yang and programmer Pierre-Luc Griffet, when they told the Skill Up podcast that the Steam Machine would be priced according to the current PC market rather than the console market. In a later video, Sebastian even updated this price recommendation to $700 to $750, which I think back in November would have been reasonable. Today, the Steam Machine was put up for reservation, and the price for each version is about what Linus and the Valve reps said it would be. The 512 gigabyte model costs $1,049 by itself, or $1,128 with a controller, while the 2 terabyte model costs $1,349 on its own, or $1,428 with a controller. However, while it's in line with the pricing discussions from last year, Linus Sebastian conducted an impromptu survey in his live stream chat at the time, asking what his viewers would pay for a console with the Steam Machine specs, and the answers were mostly in the $500 to $600 range. When one person said they'd pay $1,000, he looked at the screen and said, "You're crazy." In other words, while the price shouldn't take anyone by surprise, it doesn't seem like most gamers will want to buy a Steam Machine for the current price, and many of the responses to the Steam Machine reservation posts on X reflect this. Yeah, it's awful at this price. It's just too expensive and performance too limited. I love Valve, but this should have been canned, to be honest. Some users clearly won't pay that much for a Steam Machine, but are having fun with the price's announcement. Steam Machine is here, and you can sign up now. Steam Machine, 512 gigabytes. Steam Machine, 2 terabytes. Me and my boys finding the money to buy one Steam Machine, robbing a bank. However, some users are more understanding about the expensive Steam Machine, blaming the current RAM shortage for the high price, which is true. This would have been $700 last year. It sucks now, but Valve is in this for the long haul. Hopefully prices go down in a few years and will be the first of many console generations. Valve did say it would have to reevaluate the asking price for the Steam Machine due to the memory shortage in February. And to be fair, this is a problem affecting many aspects of the electronics industry, including video game console sales. In his video on the Steam Machine, Linus Sebastian factored in the memory shortage while evaluating a reasonable price. He even allowed for an $800 price if the market goes completely wackadoodle. But it looks like even Sebastian's most generous pricing was significantly lower than Valve wants to charge, whether because of the memory shortage or not. Weaker than a PS5, but that's also weaker than an Xbox Series X for more money. Wild work, Valve Software. The Steam Machine goes on sale in a week, so it won't be long until we see just how much PC gaming on a TV is worth to gamers. So here's my thing, and this is the thing. I have been wildly excited for the Steam Machine ever since announcement.
Mhm.
And I always thought that it was going to be more expensive than people thought it was going to be. I thought that the baseline cost was going to be $800, and I thought at the upper end it would be $1,000 to $1,100. And at that price point, I think it's a reasonable ask. Here's why I was so excited about it. I think there were a couple of things about the Steam Machine that people were overlooking that I didn't see anybody talking about. One has to do directly with the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is beginning to show its age. It's underpowered, but there's no Steam Deck 2 on the horizon because they want a generational leap in performance. But the Steam Machine is supposed to be essentially the equivalent of 6 times as powerful as the Steam Deck on its own. But what it's giving you is the console-like experience on your TV in your living room, if that's what you want to use it for. But bear in mind, you can stream from the Steam Machine. If you do that with your Steam Deck, you're now getting the equivalent of a Steam Deck that is 6 times more powerful, that extends its life until the Steam Deck 2 comes out. But the even bigger thing to me is that this lets you get off the Microsoft plantation. And that's really exciting to me. The work that Valve has done with the Proton interpolation layer is incredible in getting games to work on a Linux system, and the SteamOS is incredibly friendly. And there is a desktop environment, so if you want to run it like a computer, you absolutely can. So I see them making an entire ecosystem play between the Steam Deck for your portable gaming, the Steam Machine for your living room playing, and the Steam Frame if you're interested in VR, which is sort of like a Steam Deck for your face. This is an incredible play, and I am worried that the angle I want to take with this is what I see happening in the tech space and have been seeing for a while is there has been a giant concerted push for cloud computing, and you're usually hearing about that in the business environment. But Windows 11 shows where their headspace is at. They want all your data. They want telemetry on what you're doing. More than that, they want to rent you your software. They do not want you to own it. And it's been that way for a while, but it's getting worse and worse. And the direction that I see things going is that the industry does not want you to have local compute capability. Eventually, they want you to have a dumb terminal so that your identity is tied to it, so that they can see what you're doing, where you're going, so that you pay a monthly fee for every piece of software that you want to run and you own nothing. Valve, to me, was making a direct defensive play against that by allowing you to preserve local compute, to have more efficient processing on older hardware because you're getting rid of the Microsoft overhead, and they're making it easy enough that the casual user can operate in the environment without any additional instruction, and most things just work. So this is my real fear with what's happened in the industry with essentially AI data centers have gobbled up the hardware industry. Crucial is no longer making memory for the consumer market. They're only producing it for now AI data centers because they're basically ordering their entire production line. You're seeing the same thing happen with physical GPUs, where NVIDIA is getting less and less interested in the consumer market. I worry, especially for gamers, you're going to lose the ability to own your own PC. I think that's the direction that this was going, and I feel like part of this artificial scarcity is being driven because the industry, besides the AI stuff, I think they saw this as a threat. I think they saw what Valve was doing, producing an alternative ecosystem that could potentially strike them down, and now what they've done is they've created artificial scarcity. What say you?
Well, okay. I have not been in the market for a new console in a while, but I agree totally with a lot of the problems you're outlining systematically in the industry, and it dovetail with something um I know people are calling surveillance capitalism.
Mhm.
Not crazy about that as a term because capitalism is a way of organizing for projects. It's not exactly this thing, but yeah, we'll go surveillance capitalism for just for the sake of argument. I think it's incredibly pernicious, and I would love to see something to combat it. I have a couple of ideas, but you know, who knows?
Well, one saving grace here is that Valve is obviously disappointed that they had to offer it at this price point as
Hmm.
well. In their FAQ on the order page, they as much as basically say so without really saying so.
Right.
They are basically saying they're continuing to extend the capabilities of SteamOS to hopefully support video cards that are not just AMD, which means they're going to be expanding into NVIDIA cards as well.
Hmm.
They want you to be able to build your own systems and run SteamOS on it, but you do lose a few things by doing that, including support and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, um,
I like what they're doing, but yeah, that price point is hard to take when I hesitate to say it's just a game console because it's a computer that's purpose built.
yeah, but the other side of it is part of the ways that they were trying to keep the costs down is by basically using hardware that is essentially 3 years old.
Hmm.
So it's not just that it's overpriced, it's that you're paying that price for hardware that is at least a generation behind.
That was
And
Nintendo's play for it has been for a long time.
yeah,
So it's not a new position. And I love the idea of getting people out of the Microsoft ecosystem.
yep. And I see here Wolf McGruffle is saying, will the Steam Machine allow for online multiplayer in popular games like Battlefield? Last I recall, the Steam Deck couldn't run it because it wasn't a Windows device. So there are some interesting developments there. And some of this I'm probably going to get wrong because it was from something that I heard a couple of months ago now. So my memory's a little fuzzy. Forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. Um, my understanding is, first of all, I'm certain that eventually Steam is going to introduce its own anti cheat mechanism that they will make available to game providers so that they can get around those problems with the other anti cheat programs that are currently on the market that give you kernel level access. What I heard was that they had moved Steam in a direction so that um, every game that you run through the Steam OS is running in a virtual machine so that essentially they are dictating the environment so that it is uniform, which effectively acts as anti cheat and would hopefully satisfy game publishers because you know that it's running in a controlled environment. Um, whether that's actually been brought into the release client or not, I don't know yet. I just remember hearing this a couple of months ago. So I do think that that's something that will be addressed because it's going to have to be if they want to corner the market. Um, anyway, that was my big AI conversation for the night. I do really want to ring the bell for people about preserving local compute because I don't think it's on a lot of people's radar, and it
I think that's incredibly
absolutely should
important.
be. Yeah, yeah.
And particularly when it comes to AI, because a lot of the reasons we have guardrails on AI currently is because so much of the computing is going on in the cloud environment, and they cannot have those things on their hardware because they don't want to be responsible.
Yeah, and there is something to be said for hybrid environments where you have, for instance, you can run a local AI agent on your machine
Hmm.
and only put stuff in the cloud that is non-sensitive. The hybrid is a thing,
Hmm.
but I know how corporations operate, and I know how much they love to monetize absolutely everything that they
Yeah.
can, and that means they don't want you running your own software. They want to run the software in the cloud and charge you for access to it. And
Yeah.
That's not good for consumers, and that is
Mhm.
a thing that I am very, very worried about. That's before you even address the privacy concern.
Yeah.
So,
Well, did you hear that Microsoft had, at one point you just bought your software and you own the software forever. But they recently did an update to some of the older softwares and they changed the language that explicitly
yeah.
said it used to be you owned it and now it's access.
Uh-huh. Retroactively changing the EULA. And in a lot of those cases, it's like they just pop up a window saying you have to agree to this EULA if you still want to use it.
Hmm.
Personally, I think that should be challenged, but good luck, because
Hmm.
most of the time you don't know what you're agreeing to in that EULA. Nobody ever reads it. No, everybody just hits agree. And if there's verbiage in there that says that we can update the EULA at any time, well, you've just screwed yourself.
Yep.
So
But you got to
anyway.
participate in the modern world.
That's the part that I'm worried about. I
Hmm.
fear that we're entering an environment between job losses related to AI, artificial hardware scarcity due to them gobbling up the entire market, and the economy being in the state that it's in. I see a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. And
Hmm.
if you cannot function without access to a digital identity, which is where all of this is going, that's a really scary prospect, and it's something that people should be thinking about.
Though inevitably, when they overbuild on data centers, you'll be able to pick up cast off merchandise in the secondhand market.
I thought about that. I'm not so sure. Um, because I suspect a lot of that hardware will be secondarily purposed to lower tiers of their AI
Hmm,
functions.
could
Because
be.
you do have different service tiers
Hmm.
when you're subscribing to different services. I think they'll still make use of the hardware. And even then, as much wear and tear as these AI data centers are going to be um, undergoing from the sheer amount of use,
Hmm.
I'm not sure that I would want to buy the hardware on the secondary market. It'd be like buying a used truck with 300,000 miles on it.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, people, don't worry so much about the water thing with the data centers. What passes through data centers ends up just as warmer water because it's used for cooling. Worry about the power usage because we haven't been building enough nuclear power plants.
Correct. All right. Next up, we've got original animated Lilo and Stitch director to take over Lilo and Stitch live action sequel, which I thought was interesting. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Chris Sanders, who co-created, co-wrote, and co-directed the original 2002 animated Lilo and Stitch, has signed on to direct the upcoming live-action sequel. Sanders has already been attached as the film's screenwriter. The move comes after the surprising success of 2025's live-action Lilo and Stitch. Several of Disney's recent remakes have produced mixed results both critically and commercially. Meanwhile, Lilo and Stitch has exceeded early box office projections. The film outgrossed the live-action Snow White during its first 4 days in theaters and ultimately earned more than $1 billion worldwide. Its performance was strong enough that Disney quickly moved forward with a sequel, officially announcing the project just weeks after the film's release. Chris Sanders has remained closely connected to the property throughout its history. In addition to helping create the original film, he also provided the iconic voice of Stitch, a role he reprised for the live-action adaptation. His involvement has often been viewed as a key link between the animated classic and Disney's modern reimagining. While the 2025 film was generally well received, some of its creative changes sparked controversy among fans. Many critics argued that director Dean Fleischer Camp undermined the heart of the original story through comments he made after the film's release. In an interview, Camp said, "We wanted to tell a story that's honest about what it means to lose everything and still find a way forward. People do get left behind, like what Nani says, and it's incumbent upon the community to make sure that they aren't forgotten." With Chris Sanders now serving as both writer and director of Lilo and Stitch 2, some fans may be hopeful that the franchise will return more closely to its roots. Early reports indicate that Lilo and Stitch 2 will feature an original story rather than adapt the 2005 direct-to-video sequel Stitch Has a Glitch. That has led to speculation online that the new film could introduce Captain Gantu. While he served as the primary antagonist in the animated original, the character was completely absent from the live-action adaptation. At the time, Camp said that Gantu was one of those things that just didn't work so well in live action. He framed the decision as a way to create more breathing room for the emotional story between the two sisters. However, some fans believe the character's absence came down to budget limitations. With the impressive performance of the first film and Chris Sanders now directing the sequel, any barriers to Gantu's return may have been removed. The sequel appears to be moving forward quickly. The Hollywood Reporter states that production is expected to begin later this year, with Disney already setting a theatrical release date of May 26, 2028. Whether Sanders can satisfy both longtime fans and newer audiences remains to be seen. However, after a billion-dollar box office run with the first live-action film, Disney appears determined to keep the next installment in the hands of someone who helped define these characters from the very beginning. Thoughts?
It's hard to say because I didn't like the live action remake originally. I think we discussed that when it all came out.
Yep. My son was actually quite disappointed
Oh yeah.
because, yeah, he felt that it was off and not right.
Mhm.
And Lilo and Stitch was one of his favorite movies. He was actually more upset about it than I was, which
Hmm.
surprised me. Um,
So
so
one of the
I think
things
going
that
with
I
go
thought
ahead.
was off about it was that Lilo's sister had these motivations that made a whole lot of sense for college educated people in a competitive field, but they didn't make a whole lot of sense for her.
Go on.
So they live in a tropical paradise,
Mhm.
maybe not the best part of town, but her big dream is to, you know, be on the water. She loves surfing in the comic book or the original cartoon. Uh, in the new one, she wanted to be a, I think, marine biologist, and so she was absolutely convinced that she had to go to school now, and by not doing it now, she was losing opportunity, and so she ends up pursuing that and leaving her sister in the foster care system. Now they engineer things so that she's in foster care with family friends. Okay, that
Yep.
if that's the way you got to go, that's fine. It's the best of possible situations. But there were things that happened in that movie, like Lilo ends up in the hospital, and then the social worker lady shows up and berates her for not getting insurance. If you show up at the hospital without insurance, you know what the social worker who works at the hospital does? They get you set up with insurance. It's just that's the way it works.
So, do you think they're going to be addressing the concerns about the deviations from the original one? Are they going to retcon what they did?
I think that her sister Nani is her sister, right?
Yes.
I think Nani will just have been graduated and she'll be working at a marine aquarium.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see. I did think it was interesting that they're bringing back the original creator.
I think that's
I,
great.
I do too. I hope it makes them more faithful to the source material, let's say. I also hope that they dedicate it to the lady who just passed away, who was the original voice of Lilo. I think that would be a good thing for them to do. And I hope they bring back Captain Gantu too, because that was another
Mhm.
thing that my son was upset about. We do have a super chat from Archer Merchant for 2 saying, it's funny. Shields keep emphasizing Gunn met the Ellisons. And I hadn't seen them emphasizing that, but I'll take your word for it. And that just seems to be more of their tantrum about the merger. And so, they can yell and scream, but I don't think it's going to help their movie all that much. Um, Next up, we have Nick Frost admits Harry Potter fans may not like his Hagrid. Childlike and violent.
No, he knows my kids.
The cast of the upcoming Harry Potter series on HBO has some big shoes to fill, but some shoes are bigger than others, and actor Nick Frost has his work cut out for him as Hagrid, the giant father-like figure to Harry Potter throughout the series. In the movies, the role was played by the late Robbie Coltrane, who indeed fit the bill physically as the Hogwarts Keeper of Keys, and his performance in all 8 films was indeed stellar and much loved by Harry Potter fans. In a recent interview with The Times, Nick Frost, who also starred in movies like Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, named the inspirations for his take on Hagrid and how fans may react to his performance, particularly following Coltrane's. I've tried to take what Robbie did and honor that, but also I've got 8 hours here each series while Robbie had 2.5. There has to be a bit more to him. So, he's from Bristol. He's nice, a bit quiet. Frost also named his uncle Emmy as an inspiration for his version of Hagrid. Frost's uncle contracted scarlet fever when Frost was 10 and never grew up from that point. Finally, Frost was inspired by the Green Mile's John Coffey, portrayed by the late Michael Clarke Duncan, who he describes as huge, violent, but childlike. However, Frost is realistic about how Harry Potter fans will react to his performance. Some people won't like it. They'll go, "Not my Hagrid," and that is all right. Indeed, he is correct, because the way he describes his inspirations for the character sounds far from who Hagrid is. The Hogwarts Keeper of Keys and Grounds has his quirks, particularly when it comes to having great affection for creatures who would cause most normal people's demise, but he otherwise has a big heart, and as mentioned before, is one of the few father-like figures to Harry. Hagrid's character is certainly not childlike in his demeanor, nor is he truly violent, even being a half-giant. Hagrid was raised by his wizard father in the west country of England, after his giantess mother abandoned them and returned to the giant colony. He has very few memories of his mother, but he has many fond memories of his father. In one story, he told the trio of the times he became annoyed with his father, telling them he'd pick him up and set him on top of a dresser, which amused his father greatly. My dad was broken-hearted when she went. Tiny little bloke, my dad was. By the time I was 6, I could lift it up and put him on top of the dresser if he annoyed me. It used to make him laugh. Hagrid telling Madame Maxine of his father in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Hagrid had been expelled from Hogwarts during his 3rd year, after Tom Riddle framed him for opening the Chamber of Secrets and using Aragog, his pet acromantula, to attack several Muggle-born students. Though his wand had been snapped in half after his expulsion from school, Hagrid was trained as the gamekeeper of Hogwarts and allowed to live on the school grounds at the request of the then Transfiguration Professor, Albus Dumbledore. At this rate, the HBO reboot of this beloved series doesn't look like it will get fans excited to watch, especially after the blatant race swap of Severus Snape. However, there is no doubt this series will be one of the highest-viewed television shows of the year when it releases this Christmas. How long the audience sticks around remains to be seen. So, when I first heard this quote, I was kind of defending him because I assumed that what he meant when the only part of the quote that I had heard was that people may not like his performance as Hagrid.
Mm-hmm.
My assumption was that what he meant by that was that it's a tough act to follow Robbie Coltrane. I
Right.
was trying to give it the most charitable light, and I was hoping that was what he meant. I think it could maybe still come out that way, depending on how he plays this. I get that what he's trying to say is that he feels that Hagrid has not mentally developed beyond a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping what that comes across as is just that he's got a great big heart, which is who Hagrid is. If he plays it that way,
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be okay. But if he comes across as slow, I don't think that'll work at all.
And neither do I. But I don't think he's talking about Hagrid being developmentally disabled. I think he is talking about that there's something in Hagrid that's sort of stunted because of the tragedies he suffered in his youth. But also, he's a person who has an affinity for animals, but the misunderstood animals, right? Because of his size, he doesn't really understand how vulnerable everybody else is.
I always read it as, yeah, that's part of it, but I just think he's just a softie. His heart is
Right.
so big, he
I do
can't
too. Yeah.
possibly, he can't think the worst of anything.
Right. But I totally get that. But he's not afraid of anything because he's massive.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So,
But I'm not concerned with the whole he's childlike and violent, because he is kind of violent in a lot of parts of the book. And this is another thing. A lot of people who claim to be Harry Potter fans have watched the movies and not read the books, clearly. Because so often you hear people talk about the things that happen in the movies instead of the things that happen in the books.
Right. I'm in a weird place here because I'm not what you would call a diehard Harry Potter fan.
Mm-hmm.
I've read all the books, but it's been years ago, and I actually same for watching the movie. So all of my recollections are pretty dusty at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I like Nick Frost,
Me too.
but I also have a hard time seeing him as Hagrid because my mental image of Hagrid is Robbie Coltrane,
Yeah.
and I I have a hard time imagining anybody following that.
It was such a great performance. And there's a lot of really great performances in those movies. In a way, I sort of wonder if the casting of Severus Snape, and we've discussed this before, is sort of a heat sink for criticism. We
Yeah.
know we're getting criticized. Let's do something that's going to draw it in over here.
It's possible. I really don't know what to expect out of this show. Everybody's vision of Harry Potter is so fixed on what came before. I don't know if people are
Mhm.
going to give it a chance. And by the way, I see everybody asking, "Where's Trish?" She wasn't able to make it tonight, guys. She did say that she might pop in. I did send her the link, but that's why she's not here. So apologies for that. Um, I am debating because I think we're going to need time to go through our main topic for tonight. I'm debating
Mhm.
whether we should start it now. The bulk of the crowd isn't here yet, though.
Okay.
So I think we can start with the premise that you originally pitched, though, which was the age-old debate about whether Indy actually does anything in the film. So I will let you
Sure.
set up your premise, and then I will demolish them.
Well, but I think he does do stuff in the film. You want to demolish that?
Maybe.
Okay.
Right.
So
You're supposed to be making the argument that those people that say that he doesn't need to be there make. So,
am I? Because that's not what I believe.
well,
But
that was the whole
here's
premise of the thing that you pitched.
okay. No, that's not how I remember it. What I remember was that this got popularized by the Big Bang Theory. That Sheldon Cooper is challenged by his girlfriend, Blossom. Can't remember her name in the show or her name in real Maya Bialik. That Indiana Jones doesn't matter because nothing he did actually moved anything forward. He's just present for these things.
Yep.
That assumes two things. One, that the movie is about the arc and not Indy.
So are you only applying this to Raiders then?
Well, he clearly has an effect on the other movies. Isn't the popular criticism that it's just Raiders?
Usually that's all anybody talks about. I think this argument actually does sort of apply to Last Crusade, but go ahead.
Okay. So then Indiana Jones is hard to talk about on YouTube because you can't talk about the bad guys for two of the movies.
Oh, sure you can. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Okay. So the other thing is, if Indy wasn't there, they still would have their faces melted off and everything would have been fine. But that's
No, they wouldn't.
because they might not have even found it.
They couldn't have found the Ark
Why is that?
because they were digging in the wrong place. And they didn't have Abner Ravenwood's journal, which Indy had. That's what he was consulting in the map room in Tanis.
Mhm.
So I suppose eventually maybe they could have stumbled upon it if they just dug up the whole desert.
Uh-huh.
But I think eventually they probably would have given up.
Did he have Abner's did he have the journal when he was still at Marshall College? Or
That
did
I
he
don't
pick
think
that
is
up along the way?
That's not actually expounded upon.
Okay.
I think that he did have it from his days working with Abner back before they had their falling out,
Mhm.
but it's never really addressed where he got it from.
But it's not one of the things he throws into the case in the whole scene with with
The
Denham
only thing you
Elliott.
really see him throw in there is the whip and the jacket when he's getting ready to leave.
And the gun.
And yes, and the gun.
Because
That's
he
true.
literally tosses the gun when he says, "You know what a careful fellow I am."
Yep, exactly right.
One of the
So
best blocked movies in all of cinema.
my take on the thing is that they never would have found the chamber that contained the Ark without Indy getting it for them. And the other thing is that even then, if they had it, it's unclear whether they could have found it anyway, because the text that was in Abner's um, journal is actually something that addresses a plot hole in the movie, which is that you have to stick the staff of Ra into a particular place at a particular time to have the rays of the sun come through the crystal affixed in the staff to show on the map where to dig. What the journal actually contains is that because depending on where the Earth is at any given time, that would change where you would have to place the staff. In the journal is a calendar, an
So that's
Egyptian
why the grids
calendar
are there, or the grid is there okay.
of holes. It's because you place it in a different hole depending on what day it is. So whether they would be able to interpret the journal if it was in their possession or not, that would be an it depends thing as to whether there were instructions explicitly written in the journal or if that was something that Indy had in his head.
I would think that clever Belgian Beloche could have figured something out.
Maybe. I mean, it's the thing is, they portray Belloc in the beginning as being one step ahead of Indy. That's why he gets the Golden Fertility Idol. But I'm not convinced that he's necessarily that far ahead of Indy.
He just happens to speak Jovitos.
Right. And I think, in a way, he was relying on Indy to find it for him, because that's what his thrill is. He wants to show Indy up by letting Indy get it and then having him take it from him and get the credit for it. He's just that kind of a rat. So, I'm not so sure he would have figured it out. My position is that they never would have gotten the Ark if Indy wasn't there.
Well, my position is that the United States government never would have gotten the Ark if Indy wasn't there.
Certainly not. And that's part of why my fantasy version of the final Indiana Jones film, I actually had a couple of different fantasy versions of the final Indiana Jones film, but my favorite was that, and this actually would have worked historically. The Russians had in their possession the Spear of Destiny, while the U.S. government had the Ark of the Covenant. And both of those supposedly grant invincibility to the army that wields them. So you now have an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. It's a perfect allegory for the Cold War and nuclear weapons. And so I always liked the idea that a Russian female agent learns that the Soviets have the Spear of Destiny in their possession and intend to use it, and comes to warn Indy, and they both realize this is going to lead to a religious nuclear conflict, and they have to steal the artifacts back from their respective governments and cause them to be lost. So doing reverse archaeology. I always thought that would be a fun story to tell.
That would be a good story to tell. Theologically, it doesn't work because when the Israelites tried the exact same thing, the Ark got captured.
Yep. So anyway, now, if you want to talk about the other films, Indy obviously makes a tremendous difference in Temple of Doom.
Well, and even if he didn't make a difference to the objects, which he did, he makes a difference in the lives of those children who have been enslaved.
And the village, absolutely. There's no question that Indy makes a difference there. Last Crusade, I think, might actually be susceptible to this, though. Because Walter Donovan is actually not a really great villain. His whole plan is just to live forever. He doesn't want to conquer the world. Now, he is getting to the Grail by having essentially Hitler fund his mission.
Right.
He's got all the resources at his disposal, and he even says, he'll get it for him, but he's intending to drink his health long after he's gone the way of the dodo.
Hmm.
And the Grail doesn't work beyond the Great Seal. That's what nobody knew. In that way, the Grail is kind of a weak artifact. It doesn't grant you anything except immortality if you remain within the chamber, within the realm of the Great Seal, and it
Hmm.
will heal your wounds. It doesn't really give you that much in the way of an advantage, which is why you need Sean Connery there to be the actual object of the quest.
Right. And that's what I was getting at earlier when I said it depends on what the point of the movie is. The point of the movies is not the thing. It's a MacGuffin. The point of the
Yes.
movie is Indiana Jones and his journey through whatever he needs to work through in that particular movie.
I want to call out a comment here, which is absolutely brilliant, by the way. Cape Canaveral. Also, the Ark was from the Old Covenant. That's why the contents turned to dust. Very good. Exactly true. Um. Anyway, I don't know if you want to argue any further about Indy's necessity to the plot. Um. I've always thought it was kind of a silly point. I do
Hmm.
think Last Crusade may be somewhat susceptible to it, but that has more to do with the fact that the Grail is actually not a really great artifact. They had to gimp it in such a way that it doesn't really confer a benefit. It's
Well, yeah. The- that's the thing about these artifacts. For cinematic purposes, they're blown out of proportion for what they do. Except well, okay, so with the ark itself, that's the in in the in the Hebrew telling, it is the place where God comes and sits to confer with his people through the high priest,
correct.
and it happens once a year. Um, so that's a place of power, and the ark itself, the Israelites recognized that and did at one point try to have it go out before their army to defeat an enemy, and it was taken from them because God didn't
You're
want
talking about
them.
when the Babylonians captured it.
Was it the Babylonians? It stayed in Palestine in that case.
It
The
was.
Babylonians. Oh, sorry, go
Are
ahead.
you talking about when it was placed in the chamber with the idol of their god, and in the morning it had its head and its hands and feet cut off,
Yes. Hmm.
and then they returned it because it freaked them out?
Yes. It was in several different places. It kind of moved around, and every time they moved it around, bad things happened to the pagan gods.
Right, and it was not to be touched. You were only supposed to touch the carry poles,
Hmm.
and one time when it was being carried on a cart.
Which it wasn't
uh,
supposed to be on the card.
Right. It was supposed to be borne by their hands, hit a pothole or something of that nature, and one of them reached out to steady it and was struck dead. Now,
Right.
the I, there are thoughts about the real world implications of that,
Hmm.
but the most interesting thing about the Ark is exactly what you said, and what Belloc says in the movie. It's a radio for talking to God,
Right.
but in that sense, it was supposed to be within the tabernacle and only approached by the holy priest, which is actually why he is wearing the ephod and everything else
Right.
while conducting the ritual at the end of the movie.
Hmm.
So. Uh, by the way, I disagree with that, Mike Glass. I don't think it's in Ethiopia. I have read the novel by Tudor that you're talking about, and there are theories about that, but I don't buy it. Um, I want to get to the main reason for the topic tonight, though,
All
which
right.
was reignited after we had a discussion last week, which is again Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Some people were excited when I started talking about the original ending that was in the Indiana Jones and the City of the Gods version of the script that was written by Frank Darabont and rejected by Lucas. And I've had some online conversation over the last week with people on Twitter, and I decided, you know what, I want to revisit this because we never got to the climax in the retelling when we first started this program. And it's the climax that I think is the best part of the script. And to be clear, all of the versions of the script are flawed in some way. All of them have problems, including Darabont's script. But the climax of the City of the Gods script is it's bigger. It explains more for the audience. It's more in line with what you expect for a Indiana Jones who's dealing with the supernatural. And because of that, I do want to read this. Now, this is about 20 pages, and I'm going to be talking a lot, and I hope you guys don't mind me just reading. If you want to break in with something, Martin, go ahead.
Okay.
But I'm going to be reading in another screen, so I won't be able to see the chat. I want to set the scene here. If this were Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which it is not, but a lot of the scenes kind of map onto each other. This would be when the group is arriving at Akator and they see the Ziggurat Temple in the valley. Now, the characters here are different, and I'm going to try and explain who some of these people are. Marion is still in the script, but she is married to another guy named David. Or I'm sorry, not David, Peter. His name is Peter, and he's a Hungarian. And he is also an archaeologist and author, and he's sort of semi-famous, and he's been rubbing Indy's nose in the fact that he's married to Marion this whole time. And it's revealed that, sort of like Belloc, he's actually sort of insinuated his way into this expedition to try and find the Crystal Skull. He's not really in love with Marion. By this point in the script, I believe it's revealed that he is actually working in concert with a Soviet spy. And that Soviet spy is named Yuri. Yuri in this script is filling the role of Mac from Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. At the beginning of the script, he appears to be a friend to Indy, but on an expedition out into the desert in Nevada, he leaves Indy for a made-up reason and infiltrates Area 51, and Indy sees some of the action there and pursues him, and that's what starts the chase in the movie. I'm not going to be able to explain this properly, but you also have a U.S. operative, I think, working for the CIA. I don't remember that for sure, named Turner. And you have who was the other guy? It'll come to me when we get to it in the script. There are also a couple of porters. Oh, it's the weirdly the president of Peru. He is seeking ultimate power on this expedition. All of these people from these different nationalities are after the Crystal Skull for one reason or another, and they're all kind of in this together when they come upon Akator. So, starting here, a silhouetted figure is revealed through the billowing dust. He's on the steps leading up to the first level of the temple, just standing there, watching them, backlit by the sun. The figure comes slowly down the steps, a machete dangling in one hand. In the other, he's cradling a knapsack in his arm and holding what appears to be a glowing head. The machete slips from his fingers, clanking down the steps. He reaches the bottom and approaches us. It's Porphy. He's one of those porters I was telling you about. Mind blown. One side of his face raw from a second-degree burn. His clothes streaked with blood. The glowing head he's holding is the Crystal Skull. It drops from his shaking hand. Indy reacts fast, catching it. Indy says, "Porphy, where are your friends?" Porphy's disoriented, trying to speak. "Pablo, he touched the gold and was consumed by the fire of the gods. And then the skull spoke to me. It said we had defiled this place. It said we had to make a sacrifice to appease the anger of Los Dioses." He turns, gaze traveling back up the steps from where he came. Drops of blood lead up to the first level of the temple, where a headless body lies seeping blood down the steps. Then Porphy says, "So I cut off Francisco's head." Porphy abruptly yanks a decapitated head from the knapsack, holding it up by the hair. The mouth is thrown open in a silent scream, eyes frozen wide and staring up at the heavens. Porphy's expression now matching his dead friend's, eyes and mouth wide as can be, and he starts to scream. over and over again. Horrible ear-splitting shrieks. He drops the head in the dust at Indy's feet and runs off, screaming as if he'll never stop, vanishing into the jungle. Indy looks to the others. Everybody's in shock. Indy says, "We can turn back." He meets Peter's gaze. In the look that passes between them, we can see there's no way either of them are backing down. Indy turns tight to camera, gazing with intense purpose at the huge entrance to the temple. Turner, this is the U.S. operative I was telling you about, says, Whoa, wait, don't we get a vote?" Indy, not looking back, "It's not a democracy." And he exits frame. Marion glares at Peter, rifle aimed. Marion says, "That should make you feel right at home." At this point, she knows what a snake he is. The group follows Indy. Turner glances down at the decapitated head and hurries after them. Interior, the great stone temple. Day. And they enter through the massive open doorway, leaving daylight behind. They move along the raging rapids of the aqueduct. Oh, this is something I should tell you as well. This is a traditional Mayan stepped pyramid, but unlike a normal ziggurat that they would have, it has a giant entrance. And leading into that entrance is a giant aqueduct that is letting a giant river into the temple. And that's the stone aqueduct that they're walking along as they enter the temple here.
Okay.
And as their eyes adjust, huge shapes appear in the darkness. Dozens of giant wheels are being spun at great speed by the rapids, each wheel at least 50 feet tall. They're in a single long row down the aqueduct, one after the other, mounted on a line of support gantries. Hama, who is a Japanese map expert who is on this expedition, says, "Water wheels?" Indy moves closer. The gantries appear metallic. Indy says, "They're turbines." Yuri, this is the Soviet spy. "Impossible." Descending from arrays of connectors on each gantry are a series of solid gold conduits as thick as a man's wrist, running across the floor in long weaving patterns. Viewed from high above, the floor of this place would look like a giant computer chip schematic. Indy follows the humming conduits and finds a dead man on the floor, body still smoking, the ashes of the hand gripping a conduit. Indy crouches as the others gather. Marion says, "Pablo." Indy says, "Porphy said he touched the gold and was consumed by the fire of the gods." Indy picks up a pebble and tosses it on the conduit. The pebble explodes with a flash and a puff of smoke. Indy says, "Yeah, Pablo. Electrocuted. These gold rails are conductors." Gazes around.
Sean
This
has
whole-
asked me to stop you for some reason.
Okay.
All right. So Sean, what's up? Let me look back here. No, I can't see. Sean, I get that chat in quickly, and we'll see it. So, it sounds like the Darabont script is setting up a lot of things that, like for the climax that just sort of came out of nowhere in the film.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, much more is explained, and that's what makes it. That's what makes this such a superior script.
Okay. Sean is trolling us. He just wanted to say you're doing great.
Okay. Indy says, "This whole place is like a massive power generating plant." Everybody's wrestling to accept something patently impossible. And then Peter says, No, that can't be. This city's at least 10,000 years old. They wouldn't have such technology. They couldn't. And Turner says, "Generating power for what?" Indy rises and then says, "Don't step on the rails." They proceed down the huge corridor of wheels, encountering more and more bodies along the way. Some are ash, like Pablo. Others merely skeletal cobwebby remains, all long dead. At the point where the wheels end, they turn a corner into a long dark corridor. Indy inches cautiously into the room. Indy says, "We're going to need a torch." And an overhead fixture starts to glow. The light is dim and greenish. Indy glances to the others, astonished. As they proceed, the overhead fixtures track them as if by motion sensor. The ones ahead start to glow as they approach, the ones behind them dimming back to darkness. The walls are lined with hieroglyphs on both sides. Images depict human slaves constructing the city. Priests and acolytes praying to flaming fireballs in the sky. Blood sacrifices. Strange, tall, inhuman forms. The group emerges into a huge antechamber, which really blows their minds. It's like a huge warehouse crammed with stuff. They move down the aisle, increasingly stunned. If you took the contents of the dozen best museums of antiquity in the world and dumped them here, well, it'd be a drop in the bucket. There are artifacts from every ancient era from all over the world, heaped helter-skelter. Escalante, this is the Peruvian president, says, Madre de Dios, I am the wealthiest man in the world. The others are looking around, numb, trying to absorb it all. Peter says, Macedonian, Egyptian, Celtic. Indy says, Sumerian, Etruscan, Greek. Marion says, Roman, Babylonian. Indy stops, seeing primitive stone tools. He picks one up. Indy says, prehistoric, Stone Age. He's blown away. His gaze goes to an intact Egyptian skiff, leafed with gold and hung with cobwebs, oars still in place. Nearby are rows of gorgeously painted Egyptian sarcophagi. Indy says, I must be dreaming. Peter says, it's no dream. It's a motherlode. Artifacts from every ancient era of mankind. There's not a museum in the world that wouldn't sell its soul. Indy says, try a dozen museums. 100. Hama says, how could this be? How could they gather this from all over the world, from so many different ages? He looks to Indy for answers. Indy says, one thing's for sure. They were collectors, like us. Marion steps into frame, cocks her head. Look there. Down at the end of the aisle is an ornate archway leading to another room. The archway is a startling bas-relief of solid gold depicting celestial bodies. Indy leads the way to the Chamber of the Gods. And they enter. It's dark, just the light spilling through the door. The room is big, though not as huge as the antechamber they just left, and it's round. Haba moves to the center of the room, where a round gold bas-relief occupies the floor. Hama crouches and says, a celestial map. These stars. It's the Pleiades system. And no sooner has he spoken than dim greenish light begins to glow from fixtures set into the curved walls. But more astonishing than the fixtures is what they reveal. 13 thrones are spaced in a wide circle around us. On the thrones, covered with cobwebs and the dust of ages, sit 13 crystal skeletons, all missing their heads. All eyes go to Indy. He looks down at the skull in his hand, looks back to the skeletons. He moves forward, wondering which skeleton the skull belongs to. And he pauses, expression going slack. He raises the skull, cocks his head as if listening. Then his gaze shifts to a specific skeleton and he veers towards it. Marion says, how do you know which one? Indy says, it told me. Marion and the others trade ominous looks. Indy mounts the steps to the base of the throne, pauses. He lifts the crystal skull to the skeleton's shoulders and finds that it slots perfectly in place. Click. Ephemeral ripples of light begin in the skull, swirling down in the body, dancing and flowing as delicately as smoke. The skeleton, now complete, glows from within. Indy backs away, gasping. Everybody shies back. Oxley loses it completely, throwing himself to the floor in a fetal ball, writhing and moaning in a meltdown of mindless terror. Placing the skull was like fitting a key in a lock because a deep rumble begins. The huge bas-relief of the Pleiades in the middle of the floor starts to open, rising out like the lens of a camera. Everybody scatters out of the way as the floor just keeps opening, wider and wider, steam and brilliant light rising from below, along with something big, a massive dark shape, rising up, higher and higher, looming. We get a sense of machinery humming beneath the floor. Not primitive stone mechanisms, but machines. Indy glances into the glowing pit, gets a brief impression of engineered technology. Lights descending into a blinding pit of hydraulic rams, gears, superstructure. And whoomp! The shape comes to a stop, its round base perfectly fitting the hole in the floor, shutting out the light and sound from below. What's risen into view is a thick circular column of exotic machine design, fitting from floor to ceiling. Ringing the column are 13 seats facing outward, suggesting futuristic astronaut blast seats, otherworldly and remarkable. But even more remarkable are the 13 aliens seated in them. They're facing out, their lines of sight matching the ring of crystal skeletons facing in. A skeleton per alien. Indy and the others gather, gazing up at the alien opposite the glowing skeleton. It's been dead so long it's mummified. It's humanoid, but taller, some 10 feet in height, gangly and angular, with an array of ridges and spines spreading from its neck and skull, like an exotic headdress. Like the crystal skeletons, the mummy is covered with cobwebs. Indy notices dusty, transparent tubes running out of the column and the seats, plugged into the creature's desiccated flesh. Indy reaches out, feeling one of the creature's fingers. It snaps off softly in his hand, falling to dust at his feet. Marion says, "What are they?" Indy says, "I don't know, but they've been dead a long time." Then Hama says, "Look!" They turn. The shimmering light in the room is growing brighter because the crystal skeleton is gaining brilliance, swirls of light rippling and coursing through its form. They shield their eyes as the light gathers most intensely in the skull, and twin beams of light shoot over their heads from the skeleton's eyes in the alien mummies, the two now connected by supernatural force. Indy notices with dread that the tubes sunken into the alien's flesh have begun seeping fluids. Indy says, "I got a bad feeling about this." And a massive, booming voice suddenly fills the room. "Anung Unrama! Among Dul! Among Dunabaya! Anung Unrama!" Marion says, "Where's that coming from?" Turner's backing away, pointing. Turner says, "It's the weird guy." Everybody turns. Angle on the group as Oxley rises up into frame facing camera, arms held aloft, weird glowing vapors streaming from his nose and mouth, hair billowing against gravity as if underwater. The man we knew is gone. What remains is a conduit of unearthly power. As we watch, his eyes roll slowly up in his head until the pupils vanish completely. Only the whites are now visible. His mouth opens a living microphone for the gods, voice continuing to echo and boom. And then Oxley/Alien say, "To the sacred place we welcome you." And he turns to face the group. More and more glowing vapor is forming, streaming to Oxley from the alien mummy and the crystal skeleton, forming rivulets that swirl about his body and create vague, wispy shapes in the air above his head. Indy says, "Who are you?" And when Oxley speaks, streams of vapor exhale from his nose and mouth, forming shapes that dissipate in the air before their eyes like an opium addict's dream. Oxley/the alien say, "We are the ones who fell from the heavens. We are the Nephilim. We are the Rubizal. We are the lights in the sky. Your kind has given us many names. You may worship us." Indy says, "Thank you," then glances to the others. "Your worshipfulness." Peter moves forward, eyes gleaming. Peter says, "When did you come here?" Oxley/the alien says, "When our kind was very old, and your kind was very young." And now the vapor flows in ever more distinct images in the air above the Oxley/alien's head, dizzying star clusters being traversed at inconceivable speeds, arriving at the slowly spinning ball of planet Earth, descending towards what would later be the Yucatan Peninsula in South America, racing over parched, arid landscapes, and the vapor transforms into primitive ape men throwing themselves shrieking to the ground in terror as awesome booming lights ripple across the sky. Oxley and the alien say, "We nurtured you, enhanced you, set you on the path to civilization, gave you knowledge of the stars," and the vapor forms the great stone Mayan calendar. The alien continues and says, "You came to love us, fear us. Your worship provided us much that we needed to survive." And the calendar swirls into a Mayan priest wearing a grand headdress patterned after the ridges and spines of the aliens' heads, eyes wide in fervor as he plunges a ceremonial dagger into the chest of a screaming human sacrifice. From the chest, the spray is swirled up and inhaled by the alien. The alien says, "And when our time was passing, when our bodies began to die, we placed our godly essence into the 13 sacred vessels." And the vapor transforms into the 13 crystal skulls floating in the air. They descend, settling upon the shoulders of 13 crystal skeletons. The alien continues, "That we might someday be reborn when others of our kind came to claim us." And the image breaks apart, flowing and reforming into the head of the alien itself, floating above Oxley like the great and powerful Oz, matching Oxley's movements as, the alien says, "You have broken our slumber. Do you bring all the skulls that were taken from this place?" And Indy says, Well, not exactly." And the alien says, "Then why are you here?" And then Hama says, "We came seeking knowledge." The alien pauses, pondering, and says, "Yes, you always were an inquisitive species. It is your strength and your weakness." And glowing vapor streams from his image out to Indy and the group, swirling among them, probing. The alien says, "There are 5 among you, 5 with the greatest need, the greatest thirst for knowledge, all that there is to gain. You are like the priests who spilled the rivers of blood in our name." And the vapor encircles the 5. Peter, then Yuri, von Grauen, who was a German who was on this expedition, Escalante, and finally Indy. The vapor grows brighter. The alien says, "You are the 5. You are the chosen." And the 5 men are lifted into the air and brought before the alien. They hover there, engulfed in a forming cloud of vapor and brilliance. But more than mere light, the cloud growing around them is a place of dreams. They stare into the swirling promise of all the knowledge in the cosmos, stunned by it, hypnotized, blown away. In that seething cauldron lies all the power and glory in the universe. Hama and Turner watch, agape. Marion steps closer, terrified, and says, "Indy?" Indy, Peter, and the others hover there, eyes wide, breath gone, gazing into the furnace of the gods. A whisper. Indy says, "Marion, Marion, it's..." Marion says, "It's what?" And Indy reaches out and says, "It's everything." Marion says, "Indy, no! Don't touch it!" But the 5 men are in the grip of fervor, each in his own zone of the swirling cloud, each man seeing different things specific to them taking shape in the vapor, the alien now speaking in 13 mingled voices. "What is your hunger, you 5? What is it you seek?" In von Grauen's zone, he says, "So it's true. I have only to wish, and it will be so?" The alien voices say, "You have only to wish." And von Grauen says, "I wish for the past, to see our greatness risen from the ashes, to reclaim the glory that was ours." And we hear the sound of marching boots approaching like distant thunder. The vapor now forming into an endless row of parade banners moving proudly past us, bearing swastikas after swastika. And growing from the netherworld come 10,000 voices chanting, Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! While the voice of a madman screams, Deutschland Erwacht! In Escalante's zone, he says, I seek power. No, more than power. People must cower before me. I want to be feared. I want... And in Peter's zone, he says, knowledge. More than any man can ever have. More than any man can ever know. More than... And in Indy's zone, he says, I could ever possibly dream of. Marion is dimly seen and heard just beyond the boundary of the fully formed dream cloud, voice distorted and distant. She says, Indy! And Indy says, it's all here, Marion. All that there ever was. All that there ever will be. All I could ever want. And Marion says, don't look at it. Turn away. And the alien voices say, anything you wish, Indiana Jones. You have but to choose. Marion screams, Indy! And her voice makes him hesitate. He looks to her, sees her image swimming like a fading mirage outside the cloud. But he turns away from her, staring again into the glory before him, blinking like a man in a dream, wanting it so badly, face gleaming with ultimate desire. Outside the dream cloud, Marion says, Indy, please, don't leave me. She can hear all their voices garbling like drowning men in the cloud of dreams, mingling, echoing, overlapping, wanting, working towards a crescendo. Escalante says, to be the most feared of all, the most deadly. Peter says, all the knowledge there is, more than any man can know. In Indy's zone, he says, anything? Alien voices say, anything. Choose. Indy says, I want. It takes everything he's got in him, but he pulls his eyes away from all the wonder before him and turns, looking back to Marion. Their eyes meet. His smile to her is beautiful, both sad and joyful, because in his heart he knows, and his look says it all. He wants Marion. And suddenly, whoomp! Indy is released from the dream cloud, slamming to the cold stone floor. Marion rushes to him and drops to his side, both of them looking up as, in Von Groen's zone, he begins screaming, ecstatic, and saying, I want the dream reborn. I want the glory we created. The vapor of Von Groen's wish takes final form, the face of the alien flowing like smoke and reforming into the glorious, smiling visage of Adolf Hitler himself. Alien voices say, very well. You shall have the glory you created. And Hitler's smile becomes the toothy grimace of a leering demonic skull. Von Grauen starts screaming as Der Fuhrer's ectoplasmic hand forms a vicious talon that reaches out, sinks into Von Grauen's black heart, and sucks the life force right out of him in a crunch of collapsing bones. In Peter's zone, the alien voices say, you shall have more knowledge than any man can know. And the vapor infuses Peter's body, streaming up his nose and mouth into his brain. Peter shouts, yes, yes, I see it all. My God, I know everything. And he screams as his head begins to swell, expanding far beyond its capacity, and the top of his head erupts as his life force is sucked out too. In Escalante's zone, the alien voices say, you shall be the most feared and deadly. And the vapor infuses El Presidente, reshaping and shrinking him as he screams, sucking his life force right out through his pores until all that's left of him is, outside the cloud, a tiny black and red poison arrow frog that plops onto the stone floor in front of Indy and Marion. It hops away past them as they stare in astonishment. The stolen life forces of the three men whoosh 1, 2, 3 over Indy and Marion's heads, sucked into the exotic alien machinery of the column of seats. Indy's gaze drops to the mummified alien in its seat. The machinery is humming louder now, powered by the stolen life forces, the fluids pumping faster. As Indy and the others watch, the desiccated flesh of the alien is becoming more supple, fuller, more alive. In fact, the alien mummy is beginning to stir, to move. All that remains is the dream cloud now. In the dream cloud now is Yuri. The alien voices say, "Yuri Markovsky, choose." Indy's eyes desperately go to Marion's rifle. He grabs it from her, sits up, works the bolt, and says, "Cover your eyes." Marion says, "Why?" Indy says, "'Cause I don't know what's going to happen." And he shoulders it, taking careful aim at the crystal skull, sitting atop the crystal skeleton. Turner yells, "Jones, no!" Indy glances over. "This could be ours. Think of the power. Think of the possibilities." And Indy says, "I am." And blam! Indy pulls the trigger. The crystal skull is shot right between the eyes, exploding into a fantastic shower of spinning crystalline fragments. And an incredible amount of energy erupts as the glowing light is released, the essence of the gods. It pours upward from the shoulders of the crystal skeleton, caroming off the ceiling and blazing in all directions. The dream cloud vanishes with a concussive bang, slamming Yuri to the floor. The essence of the gods is like living fire ripping through the air above our heroes' heads, careening off walls, blazing into the column of alien seats and crackling down through its machinery like live current. Quick-cut angles, and the living fire zaps through areas of the ship our heroes will never see, crackling down corridors and blazing through banks of machines that might be computers, activating systems and mechanisms that have lain dormant for untold ages. In the chamber of the gods, the whole goddamn place begins to shake. Indy pushes to his feet, grabbing Marion and the others, shoving them towards the door, massive blocks of stone now ripping loose and plummeting from the ceiling. Indy pauses at the door, looking back, realizing Professor Oxley's still back there. The old man's kneeling on the floor, an emptied vessel now, too exhausted to rise. Oxley looks up, meets Indy's eyes, and smiles. He's fully himself again. Not a wild man, not a conduit, just Vernon Oxley. And he says, "Indy, my boy, run." There's no way
Fly,
Indy's
you
leaving
fool.
him there. What's that?
Fly, you fool.
Yeah, there's no way Indy's leaving him there. He dashes back into the chamber, determined to save him, but stops as the alien, now more flesh and blood than mummy, rises from its seat, tubes ripping free. It looms up behind Oxley. The old man senses it, turns and looks up. The creature reaches down, wraps a hand around Oxley's throat, and lifts him into the air. It brings Oxley face to face, vapors swirling between their mouths as it starts to suck Oxley's life force out. Indy, off-screen, says, "Hey!" And the alien pauses, turning. Indy is shouldering the carbine, taking careful aim, finger on the trigger, and says, now this is the one line that I hate here because he's Will Smith suddenly, "Welcome to Earth." And blam, 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 blam. He empties the clip into the creature, driving it back into the shadows. Oxley drops to the floor. Indy dashes in, grabs him. Marion says, "Move it, Jones." And Indy says, "You're the boss." And they run like hell. Moments later, the ceiling collapses behind them, sealing the alien away forever. In the antechamber of artifacts, the group runs up the aisle as the place comes down around their ears. Chunks of stone are tearing loose from the ceiling high above, letting in daylight, plummeting like artillery shells into the amazing artifacts all around them. On a low angle of the floor, as a tiny black and red frog comes hopping up the aisle, chirping in panic. Indy and the others come running up behind it, and Indy's foot stomps it flat as they pass by. On a reverse angle as the group races away from us, Turner looks back, appalled. "Jones, you just stomped on the president of Peru." They keep running as the rumbling and shaking grows worse, now a veritable earthquake. Marion says, "What's happening?" And Indy says, "Something bad. We got to get as far away from here as possible, fast." Yuri says, "How?" Indy skids to a stop as an inspiration strikes. He grabs the Egyptian skiff, wrestling it off its mount. Everybody pitches in, pushing and pulling it desperately up the aisle, to the corridor of wheels, and out to the aqueduct where the row of giant wheels end. They tip the boat onto the sloping aqueduct wall, poising the prow above the raging rapids. They throw themselves in the boat and slide down, swept off in the blink of an eye, as, exterior on the great stone temple, daytime, traveling with the skiff as it comes bursting out of a huge tunnel into blinding, beautiful daylight, shooting the rapids, everybody holding on for dear life as the great stone temple drops away fast, receding behind them. And in the same shot, our camera rises into the air, tracking them down the thundering river. And our camera keeps rising, further and further, up and up, until the skiff is a tiny speck being swept along. And still we rise, still in the same shot, until we have a bird's-eye view of the Valley of Dreams below us. The cause of the earthquake now apparent, we see. Parts of the valley is rising up in an enormous disc shape, perfectly round and a mile wide in diameter. The skiff barely makes it past the edge, sailing off down the river as the disc shape rises, lifting the landscape with it. Jungle, ruins, everything. Whatever's under all that dirt has been buried there a long time, long enough that the city was built on top of it then thousands of years ago. Traveling with the skiff as the object rises massively behind the boat, straight up in the air, cascading 1,000,000 tons of dirt and rock, raining ancient ruins and countless trees. Indy and the others look back, and in that gray storm of raining soil they get a vague impression of the underside of the saucer and its mind-boggling scale. There's a trio of round spinning lights, each the size of a football stadium, that comprise some extraordinary and unfathomable propulsion system. The engines are thrumming unevenly, struggling. The saucer keeps rising, straight up, 1,000 feet now, and still climbing. Our skiff is being swept on by the rapids, gaining more distance with each passing moment. And just when it seems the saucer may keep rising forever, the struggling engines fail, sending strange bursts of lightning exploding outward and spreading across the smooth underside of the giant alien craft. And the saucer starts dropping straight back down into the very pit from which it rose, 1,000,000,000 tons plummeting back to Earth. The gods themselves are falling from the heavens. And our group goes sailing over a small waterfall, everybody spilling into the water as the boat flies apart. And it's the sudden drop in terrain that saves them, because the saucer impacts with inconceivable force and explodes with a nuclear flash that turns the Valley of Dreams into a pit of slag. Wipe 2, exterior top of cliff, day, and Indy and the others climb up from the river below, soaked to the bone. They turn, gazing back. The Valley of Dreams is now billowing into the sky as a mushroom cloud. Indy and Yuri look at each other. Yuri smiles, then starts laughing, harder and harder. Turner says, "What's the joke?" Yuri says, We are the joke. After all that, to come away empty-handed." Indy glances to Marion. "Not empty-handed. Not by a long shot." Then to Yuri says, "We're alive. Older. Maybe wiser. That's something, isn't it?" Yuri sees the truth in this, and then he nods and offers Indy his hand. Yuri says, "See you around." Beat. Marion, Turner, and Hama trade glances, waiting to see what Indy will do. Indy steps forward, smiling, and nails Yuri with the all-time haymaker of punches. Yuri's feet leave the ground as he drops. Indy glares down at him, intense. Indy says, "Not if I see you first. Stay out of my country." Indy leads the others away. Yuri wipes blood from his nose and starts to laugh. He hollers after them, "It was a hell of a chase, my friend. Adventure still has a name." On Indy's group, they move down the ridge, Yuri's laughter echoing through the hills behind them. As they exit frame, we hold on the mushroom cloud in the distance, as a man's voice comes over, saying, "On behalf of a grateful nation, for heroic action in foiling a Soviet plot that resulted in the accidental detonation of a stolen atomic bomb in the jungles of Peru." Interior auditorium day. Tied on Indy wearing a tuxedo, a little embarrassed, anxious to get through this. "It is my great pleasure to award Dr. Henry Jones, Jr. the highest civilian honor our country can bestow, the Congressional Gold Medal." The speaker steps up, places the gold medal around Indy's neck. It's President Eisenhower. The crowd cheers. Eisenhower shakes Indy's hand and poses, smiling for the flashing camera, and says, "Anything you'd like to say, Dr. Jones?" Indy glances to the side. Osgood Turner gives Indy a nod and a little thumbs up. "Go on, pal. Say something." Indy leans into the microphone and says, "Mr. President, there are only 2 words I'd like to say today. Cut to Interior Church Day," as Indy says, "I do." He turns to Marion, lifts her bridal veil, and kisses her. Then Exterior Church Day, and they come running down the steps in a hail of rice to the sound of wedding bells. Then, at the exterior wedding reception, night, and we find them on the dance floor. That night, exhausted but happy, dancing to a live orchestra. A female vocalist is singing in Old Monterey. Well-wishers keep drifting by, interrupting them with their congratulations. And as a couple departs, Indy's eyes bug out as somebody suddenly gives him a crushing bear hug from behind, lifting him off the ground. When his feet land, he turns to see Sala, drunk and ebullient, accompanied by Henry Sr. Sala's singing along with the orchestra. There's no way I'm going to sing this, but he's singing along with the lyrics. And then Marion glances to Indy and says, "I guess you could say that." Marion kisses Sala. Henry shoves Sala aside. Indy shocked to find his father also drunk, face streaming with tears. Then Henry says, "Look at them. Aren't they beautiful?" He stuns Indy even more by throwing his arm around him. "I'm so proud of you, son. So proud." And then he pulls back and says, "In fact, I'm going to sing a song at your wedding." As Indy says, "Dad, that's not really necessary." But the old man's gone. Indy turns back to Marion with trepidation. They keep dancing. Indy glances apprehensively to the stage as the singer finishes and hands the microphone to Henry, who murmurs to the band leader. The band launches into the intro of "Fly Me to the Moon." Indy says, "I've never seen him like that, or heard him sing before." And Marion says, "Come on, I bet he's not so bad." Indy's not so sure. He glances over and sees Professor Oxley seated at a table in his tweedy suit, nursing a glass of white wine. The old fellow's looking a bit wan in the aftermath of his ordeal, but is definitely himself again. He catches Indy's eye, raises his glass in a toast. Indy and Marion smile warmly back, and everybody winces, including Oxley, as Henry starts singing. And boy, is he terrible. And he starts singing the song, and Indy says, "You lost that bet." And Marion says, "He's happy. That's what counts." And Indy says, "Right." The camera closes in, moving tighter and tighter on our dancing couple as Marion says, "So, Mr. Jones." And Indy says, "Yes, Mrs. Jones." Marion says, "There's something you never told me. Something I need to know." And Indy says, "Uh-oh, what's that?" Marion says, "Back in the Lost City, when you were in that dream cloud, what did you see in there?" Indy hesitates, trying to find the words. "It was like seeing everything in the universe all at once, like suddenly knowing all the secrets there are to know, the meaning of it all." Marion said, "So? Why didn't you take it? All that fortune and glory?" Indy says, "I did." She looks up at him, not getting it. By now we're very tight on camera. Indy, "What I saw in my dream cloud? You. I saw you. You're my fortune and glory, kid." Marion melts. As they come together for a kiss, the angle drifts past them through all the dancing couples, and we close in to find Oxley alone at his table in the corner, unnoticed by all, amusing himself by making the silverware dance and twirl on the table before him like the couples on the dance floor, using only the power of his mind. Bemused and amused, he glances up towards the sky, and we tilt up off his look to the millions of stars shining like diamonds above, and as a series of shooting stars streak across the night sky, we fade out.
There's a lot to like in there.
I think it's a heck of a lot better than the ending that we actually got.
And there's a lot of stuff that would have been altered or cut because some of my things are quibbly. I don't like some of the bon mots, and the lines are, this is a little too Han Solo. This is a little too on the nose for things that Indy and Marion said to each other before.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with all of that. But what I like about it is that it provides the context for what the aliens were, what they were
Hmm.
doing there, why they had all the treasure, where the legend of the lost city of gold came from, what the gold was actually accomplishing, why it was deadly to touch it. Um, it gives you, and I'm going to disagree with this still, Mike Clash. You're saying aliens. It's a better ending, but it's still aliens, Lorn. It's also the Nephilim. They are fallen angels. They are fallen down to earth. They set themselves up as gods amongst the early civilizations and used them as slaves. It explains the Aztec sacrifice and why it was being done, and um, it also gives you that supernatural ending that you expect, including one of the things that bugs me about the end of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is that the aliens, presumably at the end of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, are happy to be revived and offer a boon to them. And the only one that takes them up on the offer is Kate Capshaw. I can't think of her character's name right off the top of my head. She wants knowledge, and they grant it, and it destroys her. But that doesn't make sense in context for the scene. That obviously came from this draft of the script. Um, Meanwhile, everybody else is let go while the alien ship takes off.
Did you say Kate
Nothing.
Capshaw?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Kate Blanchett. Sorry,
Yeah. Okay.
mixing up my indie leading ladies.
Hmm.
Um, Nothing about the aliens in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull really makes sense within context. One of
Hmm.
the things that I hate about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is when they come into that treasure chamber. It is Indy's line is they're archaeologists. No, they are not. That is not why they were gathering the treasure. They were gathering the treasure so that they could smelt the gold to build the circuitry for their mechanism. That's
Hmm.
why they enslaved the natives. There was a purpose to everything that was done in this script that was explained to the audience, where none of that exists in the ending that we got in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
So, is it your interpretation from this that they are being honest when they say they are Nephilim in the same way that a person who's versed in Genesis understands what Nephilim is?
That gets tricky because this is the Indy universe. It's not our
Right.
world.
Sure. Hmm.
And in Indy's universe, basically all of these deities are shown to have some type of power.
Right.
And then you get into, all right, we have the Old Testament Jewish God and the New Testament kind and loving God with the Grail, which was written into history through Arthurian legend, which was
Right. Hmm.
not really a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, unless you take
would I
the Dan Brown approach, in which case it was Sang Real instead of, um, the Sacred Blood
Right,
instead of Holy Grail.
right.
Yeah.
So my take on it is yes, they would be the Nephilim. And actually, I wouldn't necessarily have a dispute with that. Say, there's been all
Hmm.
this talk about Disclosure Day and release of UFO files and such like. Were there to be an actual admission made by the US government that, by the way, we do have aliens and we've been communicating with them for a long time, if all of that was revealed to be true, I absolutely believe that the church or the various churches of the Christian denomination would likely label them as demons, as
Some will.
fallen angels. And so, to me, in that context, yes, this does make sense.
Hmm. Um, yeah, yeah, certainly some branches of some denominations would. I think most mainliners would say, "Okay, that's great. Let's go figure out what they know about God."
Okay, I personally, I think most would be resistant to the idea and would treat them as liars, which ultimately, in this script, that's what
Mhm.
they
Right.
are.
Well, and that's
Um,
why I ask if that's your understanding because, um, in
do I think
clearly
they're lying
from
about being Nephilim?
mhm,
No, actually. I think that's the one thing they tell the truth about.
ah,
But the interpretation of Nephilim in this sense is through a lens of they are otherworldly
Mhm.
and likely would be attached to demonic powers.
Uh-huh.
After all, they granted that they created the seed of civilization. They caused people to come together to lead to blood sacrifice.
Mhm.
All of those things.
Right. Which could be an interesting exploration. Um, I'm not sure I would trust Spielberg even at that time to do it because the Nephilim were supposed to be the sires of or sired by angels and women, and they were the
Right.
mighty men of the ancient world.
Correct. Now, I have to go into a subplot here, which states that in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which recently came out, it is a game in the Indiana Jones mythos. That is the line that they take. The Nephilim actually survive the flood, at least some of them, and are seeking
Mhm.
to atone for the sins that they wreaked upon the earth, and so become sort of a guardian of sacred stones for the Vatican. And
Mhm.
they are giants.
Right.
So, in
Well,
that
but what?
sense,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
the Nephilim have been incorporated into the Indy mythos just in a different place.
Mhm.
But I would state that the crystal aliens are also giants, which is something that we don't really touch on
Mhm.
in in the movie or in they are more explicit about it in the script.
Uh-huh.
This is another reason why I believe that they are the Nephilim. They are described as 10 to 13 feet tall.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
um
One of the things that would be interesting as a backstory for that, and I'm not saying it should be explored within that movie because you can't put too much into it, though, is that you have a character like Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter in the sight of the Lord,
yep.
who built great cities. And as your description just reminded me of that, of these things claiming to be Nephilim that built up a city and changed the course of human culture in the same way that mankind was intending to at Babel.
Right. Now, this is where I got to get into a little bit more about the Great Circle because one of
Mhm.
my great annoyances about the Great Circle, and I'm going to go spoilers here because the game's been out for over a year. If you have not played it and intend to and don't know the spoiler yet, that's on you. I would advise you to leave right now. I'll give you to a count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, they do explicitly deal with the fact that the Nephilim are, in this case, that you see in the game, are post flood giants but have had a turn towards God and are attempting to serve the church. The ultimate artifact in the Great Circle is Noah's Ark. And that was kind of a surprise. They keep that as a surprise for most of the game. You appear to be chasing these stones. You don't know how they are related. This is what the giants are trying to protect. They are trying to prevent these from falling into the hands of man. And at the climax of the game, it is revealed that the stones fit into the ship's wheel of Noah's Ark, and they were used to teleport. This is how Noah gathered all of the animals pre-flood, was the stones that were taken from each of the areas of the earth that he needed to visit. And as it happens, the Great Circle actually is a real thing. There are all of these monuments that are built along this certain line of the earth that are in this giant circle. This is the seed of the story of the game. And so at the climax, it's revealed that stones from each of those locations where these monuments are built were placed into the ship's wheel because that's what allowed them to teleport to that place. What I take issue with is that the Ark is found within the Ziggurat of Ur, which is supposed to be the Tower of Babylon, but that's the incorrect location. The actual location for the Tower of Babylon is Etemenaki, which in a previous Indiana Jones game, Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, dealt with the Tower of Babel and placed it at the correct historical location. So that's my main quibble with the Great Circle, is that they got the location for the tower wrong. Martin?
Sorry, I was muted. Actually, I thought I was muted. I was unmuted. I muted myself because I thought I was muted.
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. So I like the way that's lining up. A couple people in the chat there were saying they are, was it Mark who was saying He didn't remember the name of the post flood. Nope, Cape Canaveral. Didn't remember the name of the post flood giants. There are several of them. One of them, interestingly enough, is the Anakim.
Hmm. Which some people theorize is where he took that name.
Hmm.
Endor is also mentioned.
Yeah,
Um,
well, the Witch of Endor.
yep.
I love that story from the Bible.
So I guess this is my defense of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This is what the intention was. It does tie into the
Hmm.
supernatural. It is very akin, actually, to the end of Raiders in many ways. I saw somebody saying, whoa, this would be the first R rated indie film. And in today's climate, you're absolutely right. But back when these movies were originally released, you had deaths that were of that ilk that at the time were rated PG. So
Yeah, I
we've
mean,
become a
a
little
dude
softer
got
these
his heart
days,
ripped out.
which is what led to the creation of PG-13. But
So,
uh,
what was the name of this script?
this was Indiana Jones and the City of the Gods.
Okay, and so is there a Saucermen from Mars script out?
Yes,
Okay,
there is a. If I remember right, I think that one was written by Jeffrey Boehm.
okay,
Um, all of the scripts have problems.
sure.
The Saucermen from Mars gets way too cheesy for me. Um, it's way too on the nose. There is a moment at which you ever seen the Explorers? You remember the
Yeah,
Explorers?
yeah. Mhm.
There's a scene where they're fleeing Russian agents, if I remember correctly, and they end up. I'm probably going to remember part of this wrong. I think they're hiding out of the drive-in that is playing a science fiction movie, and while they think that they're safely hidden, they they end up necking in a car like teenagers, Indy and Marion,
Mhm.
and the power of the skull is used to cause them to basically be kidnapped. They are floated away by the psychic power of the skull by the Soviets, who I think have it in their possession at this time. My memory is fuzzy. I may be remembering this wrong, but of course, all of the people at the drive-in are seeing this car float over them, and they think it's part of a special effect for the movie. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, come on, guys, this is too much. This is the scene from
Mhm.
the Explorers. It's one of those on the nose things again.
Okay, so in the actual Kingdom of the Crystal Skull we ended up getting, the Russian major, she is part of Soviet
Yes,
telekinesis and no, psychic
I,
experiments.
I remembered her name suddenly. Irina Spalko.
Spalko, okay. So
Yep.
Spalko is a part of ESP
Yep.
experiments.
Yes.
So they sort of keep that element.
Yeah. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull contains some elements of every single one of the scripts, and
Mhm.
the fridge avoiding the nuke, if I remember right, is present in every single one of them. So
You see, I don't mind that so much. The obviously the damage of going flying like that, it may be strange to credulity. There actually was an incident of a lead-lined freezer, the its contents being tested after the bombing and finding it was not overly irradiated, and they ended up eating that food.
well, what I would say is that we were so reckless with nukes back then
Mhm.
and not fully understanding what we were dealing with that I think my issue has more to do with the idea of a lead-lined fridge than anything. I can accept the cartoon physics where he survives being thrown like that because
Mhm.
it's an adventure movie. You never survive the Temple of Doom plane escape with the raft either.
Uh-huh.
You know, I got to give them some things that they get
Sure.
away with. But the lead-lined fridge, a lot of what I have trouble with in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, besides the ending that doesn't explain itself, is in the beginning when they're in the warehouse trying to locate the skull. And Indy uses gunpowder to locate it because the skull is magnetic. I'm fine with him knowing the skull is magnetic, but there is no metal in gunpowder. You know, this
Uh-huh.
is a thing where and they make a point later in the movie that the magnetism is affecting non-ferrous metals.
Uh-huh.
But Indy doesn't know that until that point. And again, there's no metal in the gunpowder. So
Yeah,
that,
when he was getting that stuff, I thought he was gonna try to use the shot within it.
that Well, even then you've got a problem because if it's a lead shot, it's still not
That's
ferrous metal.
true. But if
But
it's, I don't know, if it's impure or I don't know. Yeah, because
you
nobody's using
gotta
steel. That's
they they
or
needed
iron.
a better way to deal with that.
Hmm.
And obviously you've got the problems with the monkeys and the swinging on the vines, the places where they get too cheesy. Um, but all in all, to my mind, each of the scripts does have something to offer.
Hmm.
Each of them does have some pretty terrible flaws.
I
But
gotta say, one thing I
I
liked about the Darabont script is that if it contained the fridge, and that really it would therefore have contained also the really glorious shot of Indiana Jones meets the nuclear age, the that
I, I
Spielberg
do like
created.
that shot.
It's a
I
great
do
shot.
like it is a great shot. And I understand what the purpose was of
Hmm.
having that shot. It is to communicate not only the awesome power of the nuke, but that Indy's in a new age now.
Right.
And it is a beautiful
Hmm.
it is a beautiful shot.
But
I
then the
just have a
Darabont
problem with the
script,
fridge.
yeah, I get it. But the Darabont script then ends with a mushroom cloud being formed.
Yes, now I'm gonna have to backpedal a little bit here. Because I think in the Darabont script, if I remember right, things don't happen in the same order.
Okay.
And I don't think I don't remember for sure. I don't think he gets in the fridge. Or maybe he does. I remember him having to chase the Russians in the car, and there's a different scene there than the way it works in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Because in Kingdom, the Russians just take off, and he's shaking his fist at them and saying, "Oh, fine, don't wait for me." Um, but I think there's more to that scene, and I don't remember if the fridge is actually involved or not.
Hmm.
But the nuke does go off, and you do have
Hmm.
the mushroom cloud, so it is still there.
Um,
And yes, somebody Donovan is mentioning you still got the issues with his kid. Yeah, Mutt doesn't exist in this draft. Um, that was an invention. So
I'll also say that we have seen Sean Connery sing before, and he's perfectly fine. He's
yeah,
serviceable.
I don't really like that part of the script just because I don't see that in his character. There are some lovely scenes with they don't read well in the script where there's a dispute between Henry and Indy
Hmm.
about whether he needs to turn himself in to the U.S. government because he got involved with the Soviets. Henry's urging him to turn himself in, and Indy's refusing. It doesn't read well in the script, but I think if you read it as, or if you saw it as conceived, it would work better as a scene because ultimately Henry covers for him and lets him escape. I think that actually works a lot better.
Did
Um,
any of the people who saw these scripts end up working on National Treasure?
Possible, I don't know.
Because so many of these elements end up in National Treasure.
It's certainly possible. David Koepp is the one who wrote the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull final script, and like I said, I think that Saucermen from Mars, I think was Jeffrey Boehm, but don't quote me on that. Um, they tried to crack this movie for a really long time.
Hmm.
It took 20 years to finally settle on a script, and it was basically because, as Kathleen Kennedy said, Stephen and Harrison eventually threw in the towel and just said, fine, we'll do it, but they weren't happy about it. And in hindsight, I know Darabont was really angry about the fact that they didn't use his script. It ruined the friendship between Darabont and Lucas. I do wonder if it wasn't explicitly because Harrison and Stephen they really didn't want to do aliens. And so they softened it to be interdimensional beings
Hmm.
that are aliens, you know? So there it is. That is the climax of Indiana Jones and the City of the Gods. I feel that it is a far superior version of the climax to what we got in the movie. I'm curious to see what you guys think now that you've heard it verbatim. Let me know. There is one final super chat that we have here saying, when are you coming to Portland, Lorn, for the hats? I assume you're talking about the Penman hats. Um, it likely wouldn't be for quite some time. I'm still a little strapped for cash and trying to work through that situation, so I'm not buying a hat anytime soon. But also, while I would love to have a Penman hat because it is based off of Steve Delk's designs, I'm kind of looking at I think it's the Adventure Built. No, that was what Steve Delk called his line before he gave it to Penman. It's Advintage. They are actually a German hat that I've had my eye on. Eventually, I'd love to have one of each type, but I'll have to get my financials in better places before I can start looking at a new hat again. So maybe someday, but we'll see. In any case, guys, that's it for our show tonight. Martin, do you have anything else to add before we close it out?
Just that you can find the Lost Guys on that Park Place as a member exclusive, and then a couple of months later, after they've been uploaded, you can find them available to anybody on T3PO.
Good enough. We're going to close out for tonight. In the meantime, I'm hoping that on Friday that we will be doing the cinema of 1988. Get your lists together there to compare with us and see how we turn out. Until then, hope you all have a great week.
The bell rings every morning. It's off to school and work. Waiting for some fun while my boss acts like a jerk. Pro show afternoons. Midnight sketch can't come too soon. The afternoon and sketch can't come too soon. But at night I'm filled with dread. I know just what I'll do instead. Come on and follow me. It's time you see for Lorn and Apollo. Time to laugh and learn. Come feel the burn of what the fandom was. What random fun doesn't escape? Isn't it great? Late night with Lorn and Apollo.